You know what's worse than having insanely strong enemies that are nigh unkillable and want nothing more than to eat you alive? Insanely strong, nigh unkillable enemies that can evolve even further. So perhaps it's a blessing that no apostle in Berserk has ever digivolved into a crazier version of themselves, because that simply isn't a part of their anatomy. Apostles only possess two forms by default, and they're factory set to never acquire a third one, or so we think. Though we haven't seen an apostle transcend their demonic releases with an even stronger evolution, there is a possibility that they can do such a thing, but only if they're preordained to do it or are brought back from the dead. In this video, we're going to look at whether apostles in Berserk have the capacity to evolve beyond their base and release states, and what role death and resurrection might have to play in it. It's been suggested, but never accomplished. Why most apostles have only one released state. Every apostle that we've ever seen in Berserk possesses only two forms: their base form, in which they appear mostly human, and their released form, which is a reflection of their ideal version of themselves. Now, when we say ideal, we don't mean some goody two-shoes that has absolutely no idea just how vile and violent the real world can get. We mean a version that's devoid of all human morality and is fixated on indulging the one feeling that humans find themselves having the least control over: desire. The desire to brawl, the desire to feast, the desire to fornicate like a beast in heat. Apostles are desire uncontrolled. And the reason many humans accept the deal to become one is to escape their mortal constraints. Deep down, all of us want to be able to do whatever we want, and to have the strength to do it, consequences be damned. Well, apostles do have that strength, and it's thanks to the way the power of evil works. When a human being makes a ritual sacrifice to become an apostle, they essentially make a deal to become as powerful and perfect as they can possibly be. Every apostle is created with the intention of allowing them to access the power of evil as much as they want to, so if there are some apostles that are weaker than others, it's their fault, really. Apostle forms gain power not based on physical attributes, but the quality of and the intention with which they make sacrifices. Most apostles only accept the God Hand's deal because they want to escape their petty mortal conflicts and become entities devoid of such human imperfections. They aren't driven by anything more than an over-attachment to life and a deep fear of dying, which ends up getting reflected in their many visceral forms. Apostles that have a deeper reason than survival often turn out to have more strength than their base peers. Creatures like Zod, Grunbeld, Locus, and Irvine possess more skills and abilities than your average demonic Joe because they have more to live for than simply living. Grunbeld wanted to die a death worthy of his ancestors and his Nordic influences. Locus wanted to die after serving a king worthy of his skill and counsel. Irvine wanted to die after partaking in the ultimate hunt, and Zod just wants to fight the absolute definition of strength before he kicks the bucket. That's why he's called the Immortal, because his desire is so simple and yet all-encompassing that he needs all the advantages he can possibly get to accomplish it. Zod is the only one we can say has upgrades on his apostle design that no other apostle has, but that too can be explained by his desire to fight the strongest. All apostles have a human base form because they need it to blend in with society. They can't be moving around like a bunch of hulking behemoths with multi-mouths and penile appendages all the time if they want to keep feasting and slaying. Some apostles' human forms betray their true nature, like how Wild and Zod definitely look inhuman even though they're posing as humans. Some apostles don't even have human base forms, like Rosine, who looks like an elf, and the Egg of the Perfect World, who looks like a Behelit. But these base forms are meant to allow them to blend with the environment of their choosing. Rosine lived in the Misty Valley, while the Egg was only alive for the purpose of incarnating Griffith. Every other apostle lives to achieve some kind of blood-soaked trophy in life, which is where the concept of evolution becomes relevant. In a way, you can say that apostles do evolve from their human forms to their true demonic forms when they prepare for a fight or a kill. After all, that's who they really are now that they're tethered to evil, and their human forms are more of a devolution if anything. Certain apostles, like Zod, can spawn features that they keep concealed otherwise, like his gigantic wings, but that's a part of his natural anatomy as well. Zod doesn't evolve to gain the ability to fly, he manifests his wings whenever he needs to use them. So for most apostles, it's a one-way trip to Power City. They make their sacrifices, and based on the number of souls offered and the strength of their ego and desire, they're given forms with which they can do whatever they please. In fact, apostle evolution wouldn't even be a topic if it wasn't for what happened during the very first arc of Berserk, which blew that door wide open. In the over 400 chapter run of Berserk, including the prelude chapters, only one apostle has been granted the opportunity to transcend beyond his current existence, and that's the Slug Count. Becoming an apostle is supposed to sever all links to one's humanity from their souls, but on rare occasion, some apostles end up retaining a shred of the same. These apostles have relationships that define their souls beyond their first sacrifice, and only because they have more to offer are they considered for a rare power upgrade. The only apostle the God Hand has directly approached with this is the Slug Count, who, even after sacrificing his wife, still has a daughter left as a remnant of his human self. Slug Count is the only apostle we've even seen activate a Behelit twice in his lifetime, and for a rather brief moment, it felt like seeing an apostle evolution was in the cards. He was so close to dying and ending up in the abyss that the Count nearly sacrificed his daughter to save his own skin, but in the end, his humanity won out and he was able to resist the temptations provided by the God Hand, choosing to repent for his sins in hell for eternity. Apart from the Slug Count, all apostles have only one release state, which is both their glory and their downfall. If they chose well during their rituals, they lived for centuries, like Wild and Zod. If they didn't, they died within a few years of being created, like Rosine. 99.99% of the apostles wouldn't even dare to think about going against the God Hand's commandments and forcing an evolution, but there's always that 0.1% that you can't account for, and in Berserk, that guy was the Dread Emperor Ganishka. The only time an apostle evolved was by artificial means. Ganishka and the man-made Behelit. Kushan Emperor Ganishka had, for a long time, considered himself to be the strongest apostle in existence, and it wasn't a thought without merit. He had an intangible release state which gave him control over wind and water elementals, allowing him to manipulate the weather to his advantage. No other apostle in Berserk had that kind of power, and Ganishka could use it for a million different applications. Reconnaissance, espionage, remote controlling demons and tracking their living status, you name it, Ganishka could make it fog and thunder at the drop of a hat. He roasted several apostles to death when they tried to test his patience at Wyndham and then again at Britannis. But for all his power and military genius, he was simply no match for the greatest threat to his personal ambition, Griffith. Ganishka was the strongest apostle in existence without a shadow of a doubt. Even Nosferatu Zod, who had killed many an apostle in his lifetime, could only fly through his body with the vain hope of scattering him to the wind while being blasted by lightning at all times. If he hadn't found some magical assistance in the form of Guts and his companions, Zod would have never located Ganishka's weak point, let alone done real damage to his body. In the realm of humans and monsters, Ganishka towered above all, but when it came to fighting manifestations of the divine, he was less than an insect, and he knew it the moment he met Griffith. The Falcon's overwhelming aura as the God Hand Femto instinctively made Ganishka feel reverent to him, and he even bowed to his proper master, despite wanting to wipe him off the face of the earth. From that one brief exchange from chapter 283, Ganishka, supreme king of the Kushan and conqueror of half the world, was reduced to a shell of his former self. He realized that no matter how powerful his fog might be in fighting hooligans like his war demons, it would never be enough for fighting him. Ganishka tried to ambush the Falcon and strike him down with lightning when he entered his mobile palace, but his very form was scattered by the wind Griffith had summoned to put him in his place. In that moment, he realized that the only way he'd even stand a chance against the God Hand was to force an evolution, and to that end, he decided to take the artificial route. Ganishka wasn't chosen for a second reincarnation like the Slug Count because he no longer had anything that defined his humanity. He had given himself over to his inhuman nature completely, so much so that he would frequently adorn the structures of his conquered cities with the corpses of its former inhabitants. If you were to enter Wyndham during Ganishka's occupation, you'd think you'd entered hell, because every square inch of the place was crawling with magical beasts and the flesh of the dead. To put it simply, the only reason he was such a strong apostle in the first place was because Ganishka was the epitome of human ego and desire, so to climb above that would be unnatural, and besides, the God Hand didn't want to offer such power to a man they knew opposed them, despite being their natural subordinate. So how did he solve his power deficiency issue if he wasn't destined for a second go-around with a Behelit? Well, he used the man-made one that his wizard general Diva had created, using the stitched-together bodies of living apostles. Every apostle's inner body is linked directly to the abyss. This means that if someone can figure out how to draw its power out of them and put it in a vessel that can imbibe the same within other beings, then that someone can create pseudo-apostles on a scale that's unheard of. This is exactly what Diva accomplished with his man-made Behelit, but it was meant for the creation of Daka soldiers only. Unborn children can be imbued with the power of evil and raised as fully obedient demon soldiers if the process is done right, but the demon womb was not meant to transform an adult into a Daka, much less target a person that had already been reincarnated once. When Ganishka entered the man-made Behelit for more power, he ended up plunging his soul into the depths of the astral world, and what he pulled from there was the power of a demon god. His Shiva form is about as close to an apostle evolution as we're gonna get. It's about the size of the sea god from the boat arc, but a lot less in control of itself. Ganishka's Shiva form makes him lose his mind because of how much unfiltered astral energy he sucked into himself. He must have devoured thousands of people and their souls when he drew his fog into the man-made behelit to make himself corporeal. He was large enough to decimate a platoon of soldiers with a single step, and when he opened his main mouth, he spewed forth hellfire into the sky. Every person he killed turned into a pseudo-apostle with his likeness, and though he couldn't think clearly, if he was left to his own devices, he would have ended the world. In a way, Griffith did everyone a favor by killing him, but then again, Ganishka's evolution was just a part of his plan. It turns out that in order to bring the world back to a state of Fantasia, there are two crucial requirements. The first is a sword stroke that cuts through space and time, which will open a fissure between the physical and astral worlds. The second is the body of an apostle who is reincarnated twice and now contains a major bulk of all the abyssal energy available. By combining these two, the power of the abyss will spill forth into the physical world and achieve Griffith's lifelong dream, a world he can rule over with absolute authority. So if we're being completely honest with ourselves and you guys, apostle evolution is impossible unless it's been preordained by causality or serves the needs of the God Hand. Which is why it was shocking to see Rakshas manifest in the most recent chapters of Berserk, sporting a new look we'd never seen from him before. Is Rakshas stronger now than he was before? How his return explains apostle evolution. The war demon known as Rakshas died when he was shot with an RPG by Big Rick in chapter 341. His physical body exploded into pieces and fell to the ground covered by his cape-like silhouette, and his soul traveled into the abyss to join the rest of the damned, as was the case for every apostle. Except thing is, that isn't exactly what happened to him, that's what we thought would happen. In reality, Rakshas never entered that infernal hell spiral. His soul was either kept from it or plucked out of it by someone who really wanted his help in attacking the last of humanity that wasn't under Griffith's control. When he returned to life in chapter 377, even he was confused by it, because this wasn't supposed to happen. And we don't know if you guys noticed, but he's sporting both his masks and is constantly in his full released form. Once Rakshas has enough time to digest his return and acclimate to his surroundings, he lets out a scream, which seemingly opens up a portal to Kliphoff. We see the dread astral vortex descending upon the Kushan royal palace in chapter 378, and trolls have joined Rakshas in his endeavor to clear out the Kurultai. At first, it feels like it's his doing, which is a damn impressive feat because even the most skilled magicians can't open a gate like that without using something like a behelit. But it becomes clear soon enough that this isn't Rakshas's doing, it's Slan's. As everyone else freaks out about the apostle in their midst, Daiba is the only one who remains level-headed and points out the fact that a mere apostle doesn't have this kind of power. Something else is operating through Rakshas and making him manifest Kliphoff in the Kushan Empire, and that something is Slan. We haven't seen him properly engage anyone so far, considering he's still recovering from the shock of resurrection, but we're sure that Rakshas is going to be even more of a menace now that he's back from the dead. It's also possible that since he's acting as Slan's manifested vessel, his powers have increased exponentially because that's sort of how this whole deal goes down. Rakshas didn't come back to life because he had someone else left over to sacrifice. He returned because he was a necessary pawn in Slan's personal game, which is most likely going to see her try and recruit Guts one last time. So technically, he hasn't evolved in any way, shape, or form, but he has had a substantial increase in his power, so he was transformed in a fashion. All of this to say that an apostle can only become more of an apostle if they have something to sacrifice or if they're needed by the God Hand. Otherwise, what we see is what we get, and the smaller an apostle's released form is, the better it is for the person trying to kill it. As far as they're concerned, they are the pinnacle of evolution, and we have to admit it, but in a way, they're right. Marvelous verdict! But as far as this video is concerned, that's all we've got for you. Apostle evolution is an interesting topic because, well, it seems impossible. It's happened before, but only because a certain set of conditions were met. Do you think something like that could ever happen again in Berserk? Let us know in the comments section down below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more Berserk content from Marvelous Anime. This is Wizard Wheezy signing off for now, but you can always find me on Twitch. In the meantime, stay safe, and don't forget, keep on struggling, strugglers.